Hello, my name is Carmel Laragy, and I'm here today to talk to you about Australia's new program to support older people to remain living at home, aptly called Support at Home. I begin my presentation by paying my respects to the traditional owners of the land in Australia, to leaders past and present. I am based in Melbourne, at the University of Melbourne, on the southern eastern corner of Australia. My interest in aged care services began with my first job in social services, which was in London, working for Paddington Council for what was called Old People's Welfare. Later, I returned to Australia and worked in probation and parole and child protection, very legalistic professions, where I learned it's best to give people as much responsibility and control of their lives as possible within legal bounds. I went on to teach social work and then to research in the area of disability and aged care. The context of Australia for aged care services is probably similar to many other countries. We have an increasing number of older people who need support, and we have a decreasing proportion of workers to pay taxes to support the elderly. Consequently, one of the aims of the Australian government is to cut costs as much as possible. And one way they do that is revising the aged care services that we've just had a new revamp. But also just to note that our aged care pension system is fairly minimal compared to some other countries. We are encouraged through our working life to invest in our aged care through our superannuation scheme. Our employers pay a compulsory contribution every payday to our scheme. And if we make voluntary contributions, then we get tax incentives. But it does mean that people who are on the aged care pension don't have a lot of extra money. There have been a couple of events that have focused the attention on aged care in recent times, one being the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety, conducted in 2021, where there was revealed a widespread abuse and neglect, and the government was held quite responsible for this and felt had to change the rules and regulations. One of the steps following that was the new Aged Care Act in 2024. Now, the Act has very noble principles. These are to give people independence, autonomy, empowerment, and freedom of choice. And it directs the aged care system to be person-centred. However, as I will tell, it's not so easy to fulfil these noble goals. So the new Support at Home program commenced in November 2025. It concluded a number of other programs run at different levels of government and brought them together in this one program. The government is trying to have much more control over this. We have 280,000 people approximately receiving packages under the Support at Home services. That's out of an Australian population of about 27 million. So if an older person over the age of 65 needs support at home, they can request an assessment and they have a right to assessment. The assessment will be conducted not by government anymore, government employees, but by contracted services, aged care services, these being private or not-for-profit. If a person is assessed as needing support, they'll be told about that, but there can be a 12-month delay before they receive any support once they're eligible. There are 8 levels of payment, in euro terms from about 6,700 to 47,800 to support people to stay at home. Under this scheme, people select a responsible service provider. There's hundreds of them, and they have to choose one. They can be for-profit services or not-for-profit services. When they choose a service provider, they immediately pay 10% of their package to the service provider for admin charges. On top of that, they have to make co-contributions out of their own pocket. So if a person's on an aged care pension, they still have to pay some money from their pension, the philosophy being that people need to pay for their own supports. It's often very confusing for people when they are allocated a package to know where to go. So there are aged care navigators. It's a new profession, but you pay a fee for getting someone to help you find an appropriate service provider in your area. When you choose a service provider, the government sends the money directly to them, and they sit down with the person and develop a plan and a budget with money allocated to specific categories. There is a high focus on clinical care and professional direction compared to previous programs where there was more emphasis on social connections and social interactions. The regulations have been tightened, there's less funding flexibility. The big controversy we have at the moment, one of them is the means tested contribution. So people are assessed under 3 categories and money is allocated under 3 categories. These are, one is clinical, and as the name suggests, it's nursing care, occupational therapy, podiatry, and there is no contribution, co-contribution required for that. The second one is independence, is termed independence, and that's about taking medications, transport, respite care. Now, there's a sliding scale of payments for co-contributions. If you're on a full age pension, you pay an extra 5%, you pay 5% of the costs out of your own pocket. If you're a self-funded retiree, that's someone who's not on an aged care pension at all, then they pay 50% of the costs. Now, showering was initially put under that category. There was an uproar about that because aged care pensioners, some of them, could not afford to pay the 5% extra cost to get support to have a shower. So they're going without showers. So that category has been moved into clinical where there is no co-payment. The third category is everyday living expenses, things like cleaning your house, gardening, shopping, meal preparation. In these categories, pensioners are required to pay 17.5% of the costs out of their own pocket, out of their pension, and self-funded retirees pay 80% of the cost. Now, many self-funded retirees have decided it's not worth their while getting these government packages, especially as the service provider sets the rate of pay for the cleaning, for the gardening, regardless of what the actual cleaner or gardener charges. They charge their fee. And often individuals can go to source their own gardeners or cleaners for much less cost than they're being charged through their package. Why I was asked to talk about this was because I conducted a study prior to support at home starting, asking people what they wanted from their aged care supports living at home. It was a biased sample. It was people who were self-managing, and not everyone wants to do that. But there is a proportion of the population who do want as much autonomy and freedom of choice as they possibly can have. And this study clearly showed that they want independence, autonomy, and to select their own workers. They want minimum service provider fees, and they'll do more of the work themselves, recruiting the workers. They find they have better workforce relationships if they select their own workers. And interestingly, the workers also said they prefer to work for client who selects them rather than being on a roster. And that both parties can negotiate what service are going to happen and when it will be. And they want flexibility to move funds between different service categories, which is not the case now with the new Support at Home program. It's very set in concrete. So there have been a lot of problems since we've started this new Support at Home project. I'll use my neighbour as an example. She was assessed about 18 months ago, was told last November that she was eligible for a package and it could start. And she was told she will receive monthly statements showing the allocation of money in each of those three categories and what she has to pay. But by the end of May, that's 6 months later, there's been not one statement. The service providers are struggling to find the software to manage all the statements that they're supposed to do under this new system. There's also pedantic rules about what can be allowed and what can't be allowed. For instance, there can be general cleaning in the house, but no what's called deep cleaning from your weekly service worker. So my neighbour can have the insides of her windows cleaned, but not the outsides. She is particularly perturbed by the fact that she can't find out how much she has to pay. She knows she's on a full pension. She has to pay a certain amount, 17.5% for cleaning, but she doesn't know what that's totaled at the moment, and she is not able to find out. She's also using a cab charge for taxis. She has an allocation per month for that amount. She doesn't know whether she's reached that limit or not and what she has to contribute in extra. She's wondering if she needs a reassessment already because her needs have changed since she was assessed 18 months ago, but it could take ages to get a new assessment. She and many others are feeling very frustrated and disempowered. Professor Stephen Duckett, one of our health professionals, has looked at our systems and decided that, put an apt quote, an individual in Australia has a right to an aged care assessment and a right to palliative care at the end of life, but nothing in between. So people have got no rights. We have no charter of rights in Australia. There's no guarantee that you'll get any services. It all depends on the budget that's available and what can be provided, which is a real problem at this time when budgets are being stressed, and especially as world economies and wars are impacting on our budgets and cost of living. So it's a system that has some good intentions, but it's actually the implementation is very difficult. On that note, I will finish. Thank you.